I'm 22F, pregnant, and my boyfriend, 28M, wants me to hold off on the abortion for his kink. How do I decide what to do? My boyfriend, 28M, and I, 22F, have been together for 4 years now, but our journey started long before that as close friends. Our connection was undeniable, and it eventually grew into a romantic relationship. However, there's a part of our past that has continued to haunt me, a shadow that has only grown darker over time. Before we officially became a couple, my boyfriend had a friends with benefits, FWB, relationship with another woman. It seemed casual at first, but then she got pregnant. My boyfriend was adamant about not wanting kids, so he urged her to consider an abortion, offering to support her through it. She decided to keep the baby, and he reluctantly agreed to pay child support and cover some additional expenses, but he made it clear that he wouldn't be involved in the child's life. What shocked me, though, was that they continued sleeping together throughout her pregnancy and even after the baby was born. It wasn't until their child was about 6 months old that they finally stopped seeing each other. One night, we had a small party at his place with a few of our friends. As the night wore on, we were all a little tipsy and high, and the conversation took a strange turn. My boyfriend, in a moment of drunken candor, revealed something that left everyone speechless. He confessed that he had sucked her nipples and drank her breast milk while she was breastfeeding. He even commented that it tasted kinda good. The room fell into a stunned silence before we all nervously laughed it off, trying to shake the weirdness of the moment. But that memory stuck with me, nagging at the back of my mind. About a year later, when we officially started dating, he admitted that he actually enjoyed the experience more than he had let on. He confessed that he sometimes got off on the memory of it, and that it had become a bit of a kink for him. I didn't know how to process this revelation, but I tried to brush it off as just another one of his quirks. Fast forward to 2 years ago when we moved in together. One day, I walked in on him watching porn that was focused entirely on breastfeeding and breast milk. I was shocked, but he didn't seem embarrassed at all. In fact, he seemed relieved that I had discovered his kink. He told me that he had always been obsessed with my breasts, and that this was just an extension of that obsession. He begged me to indulge him, saying it would bring us closer together. I was hesitant, but I wanted to make him happy, so I agreed. Things started to get weird after that. He began making comments about how much he would love to see me lactate, even though I was adamant about never having children. He would joke about it during sex, and at first, I laughed it off, but it started to make me uncomfortable. I'm child-free, and the idea of getting pregnant has always been my worst nightmare. I was meticulous about taking the pill, never missing a dose, because the thought of pregnancy terrified me. About a month ago, I started feeling nauseous and dizzy. I had been drinking a lot lately, using alcohol as a way to cope with my worsening mental health, so I initially dismissed the symptoms as a side effect of that. But then, one night, while watching an old video we had made together, my boyfriend commented on how much bigger my breasts looked. A wave of dread washed over me, and I knew I had to take a pregnancy test. To my absolute horror, the test was positive. I was 14 weeks pregnant. I cried uncontrollably as I booked a doctor's appointment, dreading the confirmation. Abortion was always my plan if the worst happened, so I was holding out for the appointment to get the referral and end this nightmare. But when the doctor confirmed that I was already 14 weeks along, I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. When we got home, my boyfriend offered me some wine to calm my nerves, and I drank, trying to numb the pain. But then, out of nowhere, he made a comment that sent chills down my spine. He asked if I could start lactating. I was stunned and asked him what he meant. He reminded me of his FWB and how he drank her breast milk, and then he said he wanted to try mine. At first, I thought he was joking, but when he didn't laugh, I realized he was serious. I reminded him that I was getting an abortion, but he just nodded and said he knew. Then he dropped the bombshell. He wanted me to hold off on the abortion until the absolute last minute, just to see if I could start lactating. I felt like I was living in a nightmare. He argued that I might never get pregnant again, so this could be his only chance to experience it. I was horrified, but I was also emotionally exhausted, and my mind wasn't in the right place. I'd been drinking and getting high almost every day since finding out I was pregnant, trying to escape the reality of my situation. In a moment of weakness, I agreed to wait a little longer before getting the abortion. Now I'm 16 weeks pregnant, and I'm starting to panic. There's no sign of milk production, and I'm terrified that if I keep waiting, I might miss the window for an abortion and be forced to carry this pregnancy to term. The thought of giving birth terrifies me more than anything. I can't do it. I've been missing classes and assignments, lying in bed for days, unable to face the world. My boyfriend keeps telling me it'll all work out, but I'm so scared. I don't want to disappoint him, especially since he's been so excited about this bizarre idea. But I don't know if I can keep doing this to myself. I need advice. How do I tell him I can't keep going? How do I make him understand that I'm losing my mind? I'm so confused, so scared, and I don't know what to do. I love him so much, but I feel like I'm drowning. Edit. Thank you all for your advice and support. I realize now how naive I've been, and I hate myself for it. It's late, but I've decided that I'm going to get the abortion as soon as possible. I just don't know how to approach it with my boyfriend. Maybe if I explain to him that there are ways to induce lactation without pregnancy, he'll understand. I do love him, and I know the comments have been harsh, but he's usually a good guy. I just don't know why he's been acting like this. I've been high, drunk, or both for most of the past couple of weeks, and I haven't had a clear mind. I don't think he realizes how much pain I'm in and how horrible this has been for me. I don't want to break up with him. Despite everything, I'm still happy with our relationship, and I don't want to lose that. Update. The next day I've made the necessary appointments for the abortion, and it's scheduled. I've also told my mom, vaguely, that I'm having an abortion and might need some help. I didn't go into too much detail, but she said she'd be there for me, both with the abortion and whatever happens with my boyfriend. I'm just trying to get through this abortion before dealing with everything else. I feel so overwhelmed. Thank you all again for your support. I'm trying to make better decisions now, and I'm finally starting to wake up from the fog I've been in. Further update. A few days have passed, and I've had the conversation with my boyfriend. It wasn't easy, but I couldn't keep going on like this. I called my mom beforehand to let her know I was going to talk to him, just in case things went wrong. When I told her about his kink and how he wanted me to delay the abortion, her tone changed. She said some really hurtful things, calling me a slut and saying I was disgusting for going along with it. It was hard to hear, and I felt so alone, but I needed to talk to him. I wasn't sober, but I managed to get the words out. I told him how much I've been struggling, how I've only been going along with his kink to make him happy, but that I can't hurt myself anymore. I told him I have the abortion scheduled, and how disgusted I am with the thing growing inside me. I was sobbing, barely able to get the words out, but he held me and listened. He apologized, saying he didn't know how badly I was feeling. He thought I was okay with everything because I didn't say I wasn't. He promised to come with me to the abortion, to be there for me, and to support me through it all. I asked him about our relationship, about whether he was attracted to me before I turned 18. He said that while he thought I was pretty, he wasn't attracted to me until I was older, and only really started seeing me differently when I made the first move. His response felt sincere, and I believed him. I also confronted him about the pregnancy, asking if he had anything to do with it. He seemed genuinely surprised by the question, saying that maybe I missed a pill or something. He didn't give off any weird vibes, so I believe him when he says he didn't tamper with my birth control. He apologized again for the pain he's caused me, saying it was never his intention. Since our talk, he's been really attentive, giving me massages for my back pain, cooking for me, and generally trying to make up for everything that's happened. He's been doting on me in a way that I haven't seen before, almost as if he's trying to erase the past few weeks with gestures of affection and care. It's comforting, but at the same time, it makes me question everything. Is this his way of showing genuine remorse? Or is he just trying to keep me close because he's afraid of losing control over the situation? A couple of nights ago, he brought up the idea of going on a trip again, saying it could be a way for us to reset after the abortion, to get away from everything and just focus on each other. He mentioned a secluded cabin he knew about, somewhere in the mountains, where we could be alone without any distractions. The idea sounded tempting, like a perfect escape from the mess that our lives had become. But there was something in his tone that made me uneasy, like he was more excited about the isolation than the chance to reconnect. He's also been talking more about the future, which is strange considering we've always been pretty casual about long-term plans. He mentioned moving to a different city, somewhere far away where we could start fresh. He even suggested that we get a pet, a dog maybe, something to take care of together. It's like he's trying to build this perfect life in his head, a life that doesn't quite match up with reality. The other day, I overheard him on the phone with someone, and what I heard made my blood run cold. He was talking about me, about how he was going to make sure she's taken care of, and that he had a plan to keep her around. The conversation was brief, and he hung up as soon as he noticed me walking into the room, but it left me feeling paranoid. Who was he talking to? What did he mean by taking care of me? My mind started spiraling, imagining all sorts of scenarios where I was trapped in this relationship, unable to escape. I tried to confront him about the phone call, asking who he was talking to, but he brushed it off, saying it was just a work thing. He assured me that everything was fine, that I didn't need to worry about anything. But his reassurance felt hollow, like he was hiding something from me. I started to feel like I was being manipulated, that his kindness was just a way to keep me under control. The night before my abortion appointment, things took a darker turn. I was lying in bed, trying to sleep, when he came in and sat beside me. He started talking about the baby, about how maybe we shouldn't go through with the abortion after all. He said that he had been thinking about it a lot, and that maybe having a baby could be a good thing for us, that it could bring us closer together. I was horrified. How could he be saying this now, after everything we had been through? I told him that I couldn't do it, that I was terrified of giving birth and that I wasn't ready to be a mother. But he just kept insisting, saying that I wouldn't have to do it alone, that he would be there every step of the way. I started crying, telling him that I couldn't go through with it, that I needed the abortion. He got quiet then, just staring at me with a strange look in his eyes. Finally, he sighed and said, "I understand, but just know that you're making a mistake. You'll regret this one day." Then he left the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts. The next morning, I woke up feeling uneasy, but determined to go through with the abortion. As we drove to the clinic, he was unusually quiet, not saying much at all. When we arrived, he kissed me on the forehead and said he'd be waiting for me. I went inside, filled out the necessary paperwork, and prepared myself for what was about to happen. But as I sat in the waiting room, something strange happened. I started to feel dizzy and lightheaded, my vision blurring around the edges. I tried to get up, but my legs felt weak, like they couldn't support my weight. I managed to stumble over to the nurse's station and told them I wasn't feeling well. They rushed me into an examination room, and that's when I blacked out. When I came to, I was lying in a hospital bed, and 4 drip in my arm. The nurse told me I had passed out due to severe dehydration and stress, and that they had to postpone the abortion until I was stable. My boyfriend was sitting by my side, holding my hand, but there was a strange look in his eyes, something between concern and satisfaction. I was discharged later that day with instructions to rest and rehydrate before rescheduling the abortion. On the drive home, my boyfriend kept telling me how scared he was when I passed out, how he thought he might lose me. But there was something off about the way he said it, like he wasn't telling me the whole truth. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. My boyfriend had been so adamant about the abortion before, but now he seemed almost relieved that it hadn't happened. And then there was that phone call, the strange way he had been acting, the things he had been saying. I started to wonder if he had done something to make me pass out, to keep me from getting the abortion. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of dread. I knew I couldn't stay there any longer, that I had to leave before things got any worse. While he was in the shower, I packed a small bag, grabbed my phone and wallet, and slipped out the door. I didn't have a plan, but I knew I couldn't stay with him any longer. I called a friend and asked if I could crash at her place for a while, and she agreed without hesitation. As I walked away from the apartment, I felt a strange mix of fear and relief. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but I knew I couldn't go back. I had to get out of this relationship before it was too late, before I lost myself completely. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. I knew there would be challenges ahead, but I was ready to face them. I had to take back control of my life, no matter what it took. And as I looked back at the apartment one last time, I knew I was making the right decision. This wasn't just about the abortion or the baby. It was about my sanity, my safety, and my future. And I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me again. Certainly. Here's the continuation with even more twists and drama. As I walked away from the apartment, the fear of what I was leaving behind was overwhelming, but the need for freedom was stronger. My friend, Emily, who I hadn't seen in months, welcomed me into her small, cluttered apartment with open arms. The relief I felt at being in a safe space was almost tangible. Emily, a no-nonsense type of person, immediately noticed something was off. She didn't pry, but she gave me the space to tell her everything when I was ready. That night, as we sat on her worn-out couch, I spilled everything: the pregnancy, the abortion, the bizarre requests from my boyfriend, and the fear that he might have done something to sabotage my health. Emily listened without interrupting, her expression growing more concerned with every detail I shared. When I finished, she took a deep breath and said, "You can't go back there. This isn't just about a kink. He's controlling you, manipulating you. And if he's willing to mess with your health to keep you pregnant, who knows what else he's capable of." Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I had been so caught up in trying to keep him happy that I hadn't fully realized the danger I was in. Emily insisted that I stay with her until I figured out my next steps, and she even offered to help me find a therapist who could help me process everything. The next few days were a blur. I rescheduled my abortion for the following week and started seeing a therapist who specialized in trauma. It was hard to talk about everything, but each session helped me piece together the reality of my situation. The therapist validated my fears and encouraged me to think about what I truly wanted from my life, free from anyone else's influence. Meanwhile, my boyfriend was blowing up my phone with texts and calls. He alternated between frantic apologies, declarations of love, and angry outbursts. At one point, he even threatened to show up at Emily's apartment if I didn't come home. That was the final straw. I knew I had to cut ties with him completely, but I was terrified of what he might do if I confronted him. Emily suggested we go to the police, but I was hesitant. I didn't think they would take me seriously since he hadn't physically hurt me, at least, not that I could prove. But then something happened that changed everything. One morning, I received a package at Emily's apartment. It was wrapped in plain brown paper, with no return address. Inside, I found a small box containing a baby onesie with the words, "Daddy's little girl," embroidered on the front. My hands trembled as I pulled out a note tucked beneath it. The note was written in my boyfriend's handwriting. "You'll come back to me. We're meant to be a family." I felt like I was going to be sick. The sheer audacity of sending something like that, knowing how terrified I was of being pregnant, was beyond disturbing. This wasn't love, this was obsession. Emily was furious when she saw the package. She grabbed her car keys and insisted we go to the police right away. This time, I didn't argue. At the station, we met with a detective who took the situation seriously. He advised me to get a restraining order and to document everything, every text, every call, every interaction. The detective also mentioned that the package could be considered a form of harassment, and they would investigate further. I filed for the restraining order the next day, and the sense of relief was palpable. But I knew I couldn't let my guard down. My boyfriend was unpredictable, and I had no idea what he might do next. Emily helped me change my phone number, and we installed extra locks on her doors. I was starting to feel like I was living in a fortress, but it was the only way I could feel safe. The day of my rescheduled abortion arrived, and Emily came with me for support. As I sat in the clinic, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. My paranoia was at an all-time high, but Emily's presence kept me grounded. The procedure went smoothly, and afterward, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. It was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I was no longer trapped by the pregnancy, no longer bound by my boyfriend's twisted desires, but the relief was short-lived. When we returned to Emily's apartment, we found her front door slightly ajar. My heart raced as we cautiously stepped inside. The living room was in disarray, furniture overturned, drawers pulled out, and papers scattered everywhere. My stomach dropped when I saw what was written on the wall in red spray paint. "You can't hide from me." Emily called the police immediately, and they arrived within minutes. The officers swept the apartment, but my boyfriend was nowhere to be found. They took the break-in seriously and urged us to stay somewhere else for the night while they conducted their investigation. I was terrified. He had escalated from sending creepy packages to breaking into our home. What if he found us again? What if he wasn't done yet? We stayed at a motel that night, both of us too shaken to sleep. The police advised me to stay with friends or family for a while, somewhere he wouldn't know to look. But I had already cut ties with my family, and Emily's place was compromised. I felt like I was running out of options. Then Emily suggested something drastic. What if we leave the city? Just pack up and go somewhere he can't find us. The idea was both terrifying and tempting. I didn't want to uproot my life, but staying meant constantly looking over my shoulder, living in fear of when he might strike next. After a long, sleepless night, I made the decision: we would leave. The next day, we packed up our things, withdrew as much cash as we could, and hit the road. We didn't tell anyone where we were going, not even the police. I knew it was risky, but I couldn't shake the feeling that my boyfriend had connections, people who might help him track me down if they knew where to look. We drove for hours, heading to a small town several states away where Emily had some distant relatives. They agreed to let us stay with them until we could figure out our next move. The town was quiet, the kind of place where everyone knew each other and strangers stood out. It was the perfect place to disappear. As the days turned into weeks, I started to feel a sense of normalcy return. Emily's relatives were kind and didn't ask too many questions. I found a job at a local diner, trying to blend into the background and avoid drawing attention to myself. But no matter how safe I felt, there was always a nagging fear in the back of my mind that he would find me. One night, after closing up the diner, I walked back to the small house we were staying in. The streets were empty, and the only sound was the crunch of gravel under my feet. As I turned the corner, I froze. Standing under a street lamp, partially obscured by shadows, was a figure. My heart pounded in my chest as I squinted, trying to make out who it was. The figure stepped forward, and the light caught his face. It was my boyfriend. Panic surged through me as I turned and bolted in the opposite direction, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I could hear his footsteps behind me, gaining on me with every step. I darted into an alley, desperate to lose him, but he was too close. I could hear him calling my name, his voice a sickening mix of anger and desperation. I reached a dead end and spun around, my back against the cold brick wall. He stood there, blocking my only escape, his eyes wild and unhinged. "You thought you could run from me?" he snarled, advancing slowly. "You belong to me. We were meant to be together." I was trapped, with nowhere to go. I searched for something, anything I could use to defend myself, but there was nothing. As he closed the distance between us, I knew I had only one option: to fight. With a surge of adrenaline, I launched myself at him, clawing and kicking with everything I had. He was stronger, but I was fueled by pure fear and desperation. We struggled in the darkness, my only thought being survival. And then, out of nowhere, there was a flash of movement, and my boyfriend stumbled back, a look of shock on his face. I turned to see Emily, holding a large wooden plank she had found in the alley. She had hit him over the head with it, and he was dazed, barely able to stay on his feet. "Run!" Emily shouted, grabbing my arm and pulling me out of the alley. We didn't stop running until we reached the police station, where we collapsed inside, gasping for breath. The officers immediately took us in and dispatched units to the alley, but by the time they got there, my boyfriend was gone. The police took our statements and assured us they would do everything they could to find him. They suggested we enter a witness protection program, given the severity of the situation. It was a drastic step, but I knew it was the only way to truly be safe. With heavy hearts, Emily and I agreed. The next day, we were relocated to a new city, given new identities, and told to cut all ties with our past. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do, leaving behind everything and everyone I knew. But I knew it was necessary. Now, months later, I'm living a new life. I've changed my appearance, taken on a new name, and started over. The fear still lingers, but it's no longer paralyzing. I'm slowly rebuilding, learning to trust again, and finding my way back to some semblance of normalcy. Emily is still by my side, and we've become closer than ever through this ordeal. As for my ex-boyfriend, he was eventually caught by the police in another state, trying to track me down. He's facing multiple charges, and I've been assured that he won't be able to come near me again. But the scars he left behind run deep, and I know it will take time to heal. Every day is a step forward, a step away from the darkness that once consumed my life. I'm learning to live again, to embrace the freedom I fought so hard to regain. And while the road ahead may be long and uncertain, I'm finally starting to believe that I can make it. I'm finally starting to believe in myself again.